Today we're going to talk about the Carl Duology and maybe give you a better idea if you should be picking it up or not. This is the duology that includes An Absolutely Remarkable Thing, I believe that's the title, and A Beautifully Foolish Endeavor. Both of these are by Hank Green, and what I want to do with my reviews is provide context for why I picked it up, how I consumed it, because I do think that really affects reviews and your experience, what expectations you go in, what you're looking to read when you're reading a book. So that's what I'm going to first talk about. So when I did pick this up, I was currently needing an audiobook. I had just finished Radium Girls, and I really wanted something to help me on one of my long walks that I was doing during quarantine. Audrey from Perpetual Pages had been reading An Absolute Remarkable Thing, and I was like, "Are you sure I should pick this up? Is it really that good?" And in all caps, they were like, "Yes, pick this up." And it was available at my library, so I did, and my, were they so right. So that's the thing. I wanted something that I wouldn't be able to put down, that would capture my attention, really consume me on my kind of long, not very beautiful walks. It's Boston. Once you've seen it, you've seen it. It's nothing crazy. And it exceeded my expectations. I really didn't know what I was getting into. I kind of heard it was kind of sort of like a softer sci-fi series, and I knew going in that I wouldn't get all the answers, and I think that was key for my enjoyment level, is that I knew there was going to be this mystery and I might not get all the answers. So I also want to bring that there, that I kind of knew that the ending might not have been as full of answers as maybe you would expect, and it was a similar experience for me with The Memory Police. So with that out of the way, what was my rating for this duology for both of these books? Well, I think I liked the first one way more than the second, and I will kind of get into that in this review, but I really liked the second as well. It's a solid 4 to 4.5 star series. It was perfect for audiobooks. I have not consumed these as physical reads. They really reminded me of those podcasts that you pick up and you just have to binge all the way through. And I think that there's no surprise that Hank Green, I think, not that I know much about him, but I think he's a content creator on his own, so he kind of knows, I think, how to make that bingeable content, and I think that comes through in these books. Something I want to talk about before I go into each book individually and what they both did well, or maybe what I thought was less well, is just, again, how engaging these books are. Both of them were extremely engaging. I could not stop thinking about them. I would want to pick them up, and they were really useful for different reasons. I read the first one while I was doing walks, and I think I finished it in 3 or 4 days. I actually went on an additional walk just so I could listen to it. And then A Beautifully Foolish Endeavor, I was listening to while I moved, and that was perfect because it just made me distracted from the stress that is moving. So both of these are just extremely bingeable and engaging things. And when I'm rating books or thinking about, what I want from a book or any media, I want to be engaged. I want to read you or consume you. And so that's a big part of how I rate things, and that's probably why these are in the 4, almost 5-star range, is because they were so engaging to me. So now I'm going to get into the individual books, both spoiler-free, but if you don't want any more thoughts, like I said, this was a 4 to 5-star series, somewhere in there. Like I said, I think the first book's closer to 5, and the second one's more of a 4, but I really loved my time and would highly recommend it. Now, into An Absolute Remarkable Thing. So, brief synopsis, you have April May, who is kind of an art design person, doesn't really love their jobs, just existing, leaving late from work, and runs into this statue that they think's really cool. So they call their friend Andy, they make a video, and they put it on the internet and don't think anything of it. But this statue ends up being everywhere in the world, and they broke the story, so now April May becomes viral. And that's where our story starts. And it's less about discovering the mystery behind these statues, which is a part of the narrative, and it's a very interesting part of the narrative, how that develops. But it's also more, what happens when you suddenly go from being casually involved with social media to completely viral? And what does that do to your personal connections in real life? What does it mean to have such a large platform? How do you use that morally, sort of thing? These were ideas that were really tossed around in the first book, and April May is a flawed character, and I do think a character that's maybe hard for some people to connect with. I do think your enjoyment of this book might be tied to how much you can handle April May as a character. I did not find her problematic for me. She was not the nicest person. I would never want to date her. She wasn't the greatest friend per se, but she's very honest about that. Because something I haven't mentioned about both books, but these books are both self-aware books. You're getting the narrative perspective of someone telling you a story that's already happened. So this is April May looking back on things that have happened and being like, yeah, I could have done that better, or I know what you're thinking, I was a real bitch there. So she's very self-aware, and I don't know, I just liked that, but I also know a lot of people who don't like April May's characterization because she is very flawed, she is very self-absorbed, she's not the nicest person. So yeah, your mileage may vary there. Something else I want to bring up that I kind of brought up at the beginning is that this is a social sci-fi. I don't know if that's even a genre, but what I mean by that is this is more studying society by adding in a bit of technology into the mix. This isn't very far future, this is extremely near future, and we're not studying the technology so much or the side effects or that mystery, like I said, it's there, but we're more looking at the social implications, kind of looking at, I want to say if you've seen or read the story for Arrival, you don't get to really see how people are responding on social media. We're kind of looking at what if suddenly something appears all around the world, but we're focused more on the pundits and the people who are able to maneuver the conversation. We're focusing on that part of the story through one person's perspective. So, she's a flawed narrator, maybe an unreliable narrator, and it's really interesting. But if you want a harder sci-fi, if that's what you like, you might be disappointed. So, because it's definitely not a hard sci-fi whatsoever. And I've talked about the themes a little bit throughout this whole thing, but I really liked the themes, especially in contrast to the themes that you get in the second book of the duology in this one. So, like I said, you have that theme of going viral, your relationship with social media, how that actually kind of isolates you, how you could have so many voices listening to you, but you're not as connected to maybe the people in your own life. And I think personally, as someone who's just started to exist in social media space, that whole getting used to using a new tool to communicate, I'm not having 1 million subscribers, but even having 500 people who consistently talk to me is a little weird. So I really enjoyed that part of the theme, the interaction with an internet space versus your physical space, the differences there, even when it gets bigger. I think I have legit connections on the internet. April May is so famous, she just has followers. It's a very different experience. But also I really liked exploring this global response to the unknown, which is not very unsurprising. It's very polarizing. You have the fear, you have the hope, you have all of this playing out. And what it also does is it distracts from the main picture, which you really don't notice till the second book. And I thought that was amazing, because it wasn't till I was reading the second book that I was like, oh, we were so focused on this tiny thing that caused this huge discussion, and we're ignoring the bigger problems. So with that, let's get into A Beautifully Foolish Endeavor. So this one, the synopsis, I'll just be brief. You take off where the first book left off, and yeah, that's really all I can say, but I can really talk about some elements of this book that I think could help you decide if you want to pick it up, if you were maybe a little bit meh about the first book, or if you just want to know if this duology is a fulfilling story, because these are really two interesting halves of a whole. So first of all, the biggest difference is this is multiple point of view, and you get a lot of the people that we've seen in the first book, but we actually get to hear from them, because again, this is a book that knows it's a book. So we're talking about events that have already happened, and I really do like that narrative structure. But you now have these people who are reflecting on past mistakes and thoughts, so again, you get to see flawed characters, but a lot of them are much nicer than April May. So I know that is jarring for some people, though. You read the whole first book, and maybe you loved it because you loved April May, and now that's not the voice. I still thought it was done really well. I didn't find that as a problem, but I knew that going in. So I'm telling you, there's going to be multiple point of views. It's not just going to be the April May show for this book. Another thing is that, so the first book, you're focusing on mystery and April May's relationship with social media and the global response. In this one, there is still mystery. You actually get a more fulfilling conclusion than the first book. It's a little harder sci-fi. I say harder. There is more technology in sci-fi and really looking at how technology interacts with the human race. But in general, It's more about we need to save the world. And that's what brings me into what I was talking about with themes, how we were ignoring things that were important in the first book because we were so focused on this drama, on this conflict of, I'm right, these things are good. No, I'm right, these things are bad. Like, that conflict was so small, but so large because of social media, and we're ignoring the bigger things, much like what happens in our own world. But the economy's crashing, climate change is out of control, politics are all over the place, and more polarized than ever. That's happening here to the point where there is kind of a world-ending scenario. That's all I'll say without spoiling anything, but it quickly becomes team of people need to get together, figure things out, save the world. And that was pretty fun to like switch gears into. It was still just as like engaging and fast-paced. It was just very different. So other themes was technology addiction. So, I mean, we all are on our phones all the time. We literally have apps that are programmed so that we end up going on them more. That gets taken to a whole other level in this story. And what's interesting is I know from a Hank Green podcast, he was talking about how he was really looking at it through, we exist in a lot of internet spaces, almost as citizens of corporations, but we don't really have rights because, you know, they're not acting like the government bodies that they kind of are. And this is kind of taken to an extreme in this story, and I thought it was just interesting. I was intrigued by how this was all set up, so that was like a fun little thing to think about. And just expanding on that, the whole idea of, because capitalism, opportunity is not equal, and kind of exacerbating that because there's a system that's set up, and it's inherently made so that the rich remain the people who have the opportunity and the poor remain those that don't. Add that to an economic problem in this world, and it's just, you know, it's chaotic and kind of interesting. Now, I personally had some things I didn't love as much about this book. I personally liked the ending of the first book. I thought it was good. I mean, nothing crazy, not like the best ending of all time, but I don't remember thinking, oh, that was a little rushed or anything. I felt like this one was a little too neat for me. I mean, maybe I should have predicted it because, like I said, these are books that know their books sort of thing. But I just didn't love the ending. It felt a little naive to me. You know, we have these questions that are asked and the ending is his answer. I guess optimism's good, but I just, like I said, the ending was weak. I thought it was a little which is why this book's a little lower for me than the first one in the duology. But overall, I enjoyed my experience. I would highly recommend it. If any of this sounds good to you, I wouldn't be scared of it. If you're not normally a science fiction reader, it's not the hardest of sci-fi. I think it's very accessible. Like I said, it's more social commentary than anything else. But those are my thoughts on the Carl duology by Hank Green. Thank you again, Audrey, for being the force that finally got me to read this. I'd been seeing it around BookTube and I never got to. So yeah, if you've read this series and want to talk about it in the comments, just put any spoiler tags. If you have any questions, I'm always willing to answer them. If you've made it this far and just want me to know you're here, you can leave a little robot statue emoji sort of thing. And otherwise, like if you liked it, subscribe if you want to, and I will see you in the next one.